I am delighted to introduce our next speaker. Professor Carolina Bottari is an occupational therapist who specializes in cognitive disorders following traumatic brain injury. She's a full professor in the School of Rehabilitation of the Faculty of Medicine at Université de Montréal in Canada, and she's a scientist at the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Rehabilitation of Greater Montreal. Professor Bottari holds a PhD in Rehabilitation Sciences from Université de Montréal and a CIHR-funded postdoctoral fellowship in neuropsychology at McGill University. She started her academic career after more than 10 years as a clinician working with people with brain injury. She is internationally recognized and widely published researcher, 90 published articles, and 300 abstracts. She has attracted a total of more than 11 million in external grant funding and recently received the Award of Excellence for her outstanding career from the Ordre des Ergothérapeutes du Québec. I hope I said that right, Carolina. In recognition of her work with vulnerable populations in 2014, Professor Bottari was awarded the prize for social responsibility from the Faculty of Medicine at Université de Montréal. Professor Bottari is currently leading several largely funded intersectoral grants seeking to put into place an ecosystem of care around women victims of intimate partner violence at risk of having sustained traumatic brain injury. And she is here today to talk to us about building an integrated support network for women victims of intimate partner violence and traumatic brain injury. Please welcome Dr. Bottari.
Thank you for the introduction, Karen. It is really my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I will share my screen, see if all this works. Put it full screen. Okay, so all good? Okay, so hello everyone. Really pleased to be here. Yes, I'll just get right into it since all the intros were done. So just re-saying the word of caution, but this is a sensitive topic, and please take care of yourself if the topic is difficult for you. So I want to start with my key messages. I'm trying to organize my slide here so I can actually see. So my key messages right away. So the prevalence of intimate partner violence related to brain injury is alternately both stunning and invisible. The healthcare system, particularly brain injury rehab, which is my world where I come from, I call it missing in action regarding meeting the needs of these women. So I worked in rehab for many years, and I never treated women who had sustained a brain injury in the context of intimate partner violence, nor have most of my colleagues. And now that we know, we need to do better. So those are my main messages. So, gosh, sorry, so we have the statistics to support action. So 7 times higher risk of brain injury. The risk of experiencing brain injury with loss of consciousness is 7 times higher in women who are victims of intimate partner violence compared to women who have not experienced intimate partner violence. The prevalence of brain injury is 11 to 12 times higher in the context of intimate partner violence than in athletes and soldiers. To me, all of this is stunning. And we continue. 88% sustain more than one brain injury. So the presence of multiple and we know that the presence of multiple brain injuries amplifies the long-term consequences. And then other fascinating statistics. Only 21% of women who have suffered a brain injury in the context of IPV, according to one study, seek medical services for their injury. So based on that, we know many of the challenges that need to be addressed. So a lot of the women prioritize their safety over health, which is totally understandable. So going to the hospital often doesn't feel safe, and there's numerous potential consequences that are considered. So no hospital, no diagnosis. And since our medical system is diagnostic run, you need a diagnosis to have access to care. That implies decreased access to care, misdiagnoses, erroneous treatment plans. Services operate in silos. So there are community services, there are judicial services, there are health services, but they all work in silos. There's limited screening of brain injury in the context of intimate partner violence. I think there's starting to be more mobilization around that, but it's still quite limited. And according to the literature, there's no universal screening guidelines, so we are starting to have some tools that are very helpful. There's lack of an awareness and understanding of brain injury, including the long-term consequences amongst most of the key players in this world. Most IPV community workers, police officers, youth protection officers, lawyers have limited knowledge of the importance of screening and of the long-term impacts of brain injury. So these are some of the things we know. And shelters are not adapted to meet the needs of women having sustained a brain injury. So they offer services, they're not health services. So they don't fully understand how to adapt their services to women who have sustained a brain injury. And I work in Quebec, in Canada. And one of the things I can say is that our brain injury consortium of care, which is really good, it's rarely solicited to intervene in the context of IPV-related brain injury. And there are numerous prejudices and difficulties that are experienced by women having sustained IPV-related brain injury within the judicial system. Women fear, well, one of the largest things that I've been reading is that women fear losing their children. So, why aren't real changes happening? So far my answer is good question. I think it's a really complex issue. There are a lot of people involved, a lot of people who need to have some really solid conversations, but I think we do know now, and things do have to start happening. So what is happening in Quebec? So there are some government actions that have been worked on by many, many women groups over the years and are starting to give concrete changes. Concrete things are happening. One of the things that has just been published in 2022 is a document called Rebuilding Trust. So this is an integrated government strategy to counter sexual violence and intimate partner violence. It has numerous calls to action, and it is really mobilizing many, many players in this field. One of the things that what attracted my attention within this document is that it was stated that there's an urgent need to implement integrated and accessible services among all key players working with the population of victims of intimate partner violence. I'd like the healthcare system, I'd like rehab and TBI to be considered one of these key players. We are not named so far in this document. The other thing that has come from this particular government action are specialized courts for sexual violence and domestic violence, which is also very new. So there was an article in our local newspaper in 2024 talking about these new courts. They're not perfect, but the aim of these new courts is to help victims feel safe and listened to, rebuild the confidence of victims of sexual and domestic violence in the justice system. It also aims to provide these people with integrated and adapted psychosocial and legal services from their first contacts with the police service. And so far, we're still at the pilot project phase in Quebec. So there are 5 judicial districts where the pilot project has been implemented. The pilot finishes this year, and they're targeting complete implementation by a target of November 2026. And then the other thing that's happening in our ecosystem is that our youth protection laws have changed. So the children in domestic violence cases in Quebec used to be considered witnesses of the violence. They are now considered victims of the violence, whether they were directly hit or not, which is leading to youth protection recording record numbers of domestic violence cases in their caseload. So in 2023, reports of exposure to domestic violence accounted for 12.5% of all reports received by youth protection in Quebec. So that's kind of the legal system, what's happening in Quebec. And I want to also look at what's happening in the health system. So we have a lot of really good things in the health system as well in our province. So for traumatic brain injury, we have a whole fantastic continuum of care. So we have pre-hospital services, hospital services, post-hospital rehab, social integration of services. It's all free for everyone. It's accessible. So that exists. And most recently, we have the Ministry of Health and Social Services of Quebec that just published in 2024 a new protocol for the care of mild traumatic brain injury, concussion, and the whole management program in Quebec. It is in the process of being implemented. Family doctors are being trained on what is a concussion so that they can improve their diagnoses. Now we have some specialized nurses who can also give diagnoses, and physiotherapists. I'm an OT. I really hope OTs will soon be included in this opportunity to give access to care to people. And they've also, a lot of women who who are victims of intimate partner violence, we said earlier, will prioritize safety. They will not go to the healthcare system. Some do eventually go. So what this new program offers is a bit more delay. It used to be that if you didn't go to the hospital within a really short time, you would never get a diagnosis. Now we have a little bit more time to go, and there's also now this new possibility of not having a clear diagnosis of brain injury, but mild brain injury, but symptomatic. So they're opening it up a bit to allow more people to have access to services. The other thing that's happening in our ecosystem of care, so we have another pilot project that has just recently been launched. So this was published in our local paper in May 2024. So the Montreal police and the provincial prosecutors have just launched a project to better address domestic violence choking cases. What's the really nice thing about this? There are thousands of cases of strangulation in Montreal. The number of calls for intimate partner violence from our police is crazy. The more I hear about all this, the more I can't believe all the numbers. And now the police, so we've had meetings with their special units on intimate partner violence. And what they've told us is what's missing is the access to healthcare. So they're training their police officers, frontline police officers, to better detect strangulation. What's missing is where do they bring the victims in our public health system? So things are moving, but there's still a lot of work to do. So again, sorry, I just have to move the bar from my screen so I see the top. So how is our team addressing this need? So I have done all of my work in brain injury. Intimate partner violence is not an area that I know, though, like probably many of my colleagues, because of the awesome work of international scholars and the knowledge of others, I've been made aware that there are a lot of brain injury. There's a lot of brain injury in this world, and I need to start doing something about it. And what I've decided, because it's a world I don't know, I want to make sure I don't do anything wrong. I don't do more damage than good. That's one of my huge concerns, because I don't know all of the triggers and all that I could do wrong as an occupational therapist. One of my big things was small steps together. I hope you're not hearing the construction in my house. Hopefully not. So small steps together. And I love this new concept I've been reading about, which is on collective intelligence. So I've surrounded myself by people who are experts in intimate partner violence, criminologists, lawyers, so that together we can start trying to figure out how we can work together. So thanks to all of this, so we have different projects underway. So I'm going to present them to you slowly. So my first project that I got funded in 2022, so as I say, I'm very new to this area of work. So we had a new research community partnership in 22-25. I'll give you a brief update on that. Got a second funding this year. It was just a one-year grant, so a roadmap. So it was a project that funded developing a roadmap towards an integrated ecosystem of services, where we're looking at police officers, the judicial system, the healthcare system. So how do we do better? So we're working on that together. I'll give you a bit of an update on that. Our third project that we also just got funded is a large ecosystem of services. We chose to work towards a pilot implementation of an ecosystem of services for women victims of intimate partner violence who potentially sustained a brain injury. So we're just getting that off the ground. We just got that funded. It's a 3-year grant. And our fourth project that we've also just gotten funded will be throughout the province of Quebec. And there we're going to focus on brain injury screening protocols in women's shelters in Quebec. So I'll give you a small idea of what we're doing here. So this first project, which is a new research community partnership. So we've been working on this one for the longest. This is what kind of allowed me to enter the world of intimate partner violence very slowly. Trying to understand what the situation is. So the grant that we got, what we were looking at is the impact of traumatic brain injury on the empowerment process of women experiencing intimate partner violence. And our goal was simply to understand, to provide better interventions. This collaboration started by, so there's an organization called l'Alliance in Quebec, which have within their organization 38 second stage shelters, some of which are still under construction. And this, the leader, the head of this shelter organization went to Ontario, where a lot of work was being done on intimate partner violence and brain injury and continues to be so. And she came back to Montreal and said, we have to do something. So she reached out to me and says, what can we do? So we said, okay, let's try and apply for funding and let's see what we can do. So we started by getting a grant from the Quebec government, Éducation supérieure, so higher education. The idea of that grant is to bring expert knowledge out of the universities into the communities and to develop collaborations. So we got that funded. I love this slide. My student did this. I have no idea how she did it, but I love it, so I use it. So the idea of this new collaboration was that I'm an occupational therapist. So we wanted to try and see how to bring occupational therapies from the university into the shelters. So we were going to work, our idea was let's start working with students that I would supervise and let's just start something. So we started in 2022, as I said. So what we did at the outset, we started with education sessions. So we started working with the shelter workers. We explained, first of all, what is OT, what is brain injury. And then we started some different stages, so internships. So we did 6 exploratory internships over a period of 2 years, where my master's students in OT did TBI screening. They did follow-ups of women with a positive screen. Through that, we slowly started thinking of this new intervention approach. How do we do this? So over and above the internships, I directed some master's projects, so small research projects, and we started exploring this whole issue. We looked at brain injury, the impact of brain injury on women's empowerment. So we worked on that. This led to more recently, just this fall, we have 5 clinical rotations right now in second stage shelters of OT students. This time there are 3rd year. So we have a 4.5-year program in Montreal for OT training. So these are 3rd year students and 2 master's students, so 4th year students. So they're doing clinical rotations. And what we are doing is they're a hybrid this time. We're trying a hybrid for 3 of the stages. So I have one student who's in an outpatient TBI program, and with her supervisor, she goes once a week into the shelters and she offers TBI screening and post-TBI screening intervention. And I have 2 students who are working in a parenting clinic in one of our healthcares. So yeah, hospital, let's call it a hospital. It's more than a hospital, but let's call it a hospital. And so they're also going once a week into shelters to look at how they can support the women in terms of their parenting skills after a positive screen of brain injury. Our goal is to develop a certain sustainability of these clinical internships. And just this week, I got one of the shelters say to me the ultimate, that they're looking at opening an OT position in the shelters. They've gotten their administrative council on board. And so I'm really excited about that. So these are all good things that are happening. So what we've been trying within this is to look at using the helps, and how to implement the helps TBI screening, and Karen, who introduced me, has had a lot to do with developing the helps to be used in intimate partner violence. So we've been starting to explore how to integrate this tool in the shelters. Some of the things that have come just from our limited experience is what we're seeing. So despite the simplicity of the tool, to me, it was the most simple thing. It's like a 5-minute thing. It felt really simple compared to all the other evaluations I'm used to doing in OT. So the simplicity of the tool and the motivation of the organization, what we're seeing is that the shelter workers are hesitant to screen for TBI. They're particularly concerned, what they've told us, about not knowing where to refer the women for services after a positive screen. And what's the value of doing a screening if there's no follow-up services? So that's what we've been hearing. And so our OT students have worked on providing training sessions on use of the tool. They've done some co-evaluation with the screening tool with the workers in the shelters. And they've done education on, they've done some group sessions with the women and the shelter workers, explaining fatigue, post-brain injury, organization, different things, to start just having some general treatment that we would normally do in OT. What we learned from that is there's ongoing support that's required to implement the TBI screening in shelters, and I've seen this published by some of my colleagues in other studies on implementing the helps. So I did want to give a small example of the impact of what we've done so far in this one project. It's not big, but because we're just starting still. But I find I like this example. So there was a woman living in one of the shelters. She has an immigrant background. She's mother of several children. She has a positive result on TBI screening, and youth protection was involved in her case, and she was at risk of losing custody of her children, which is sadly what we too often see. So my students did an OT needs assessment. They explained to the woman the TBI symptoms. They taught her some strategies with regards to those symptoms. And so we started looking at trying things in terms of how to offer direct intervention within the shelters adapted to the women's needs. And what was really nice is, so when so my student participated in the meeting with the youth protection after doing these interventions at the moment. And what was really nice is the positive feedback we got from youth protection. So youth protection told my student, she was stunned that after such a short time, the woman in question was already aware of her difficulties. She could explain her difficulties, the impact on her parenting. And she also was stunned to see that the woman already had strategies in place to start managing some of her symptoms and difficulties. So the youth protection decided that all of that had a positive impact on parenting, reduced the at-risk, the security issues for this woman. And so they were looking at reducing their involvement in this woman's case. So I'm going to go on to my second study. So in this one, we're looking at developing a roadmap of services. And so we're looking at developing an ecosystem of services, identifying key cross-sectoral issues that will be addressed. We want to have action targets and research priorities. So the team of researchers that I worked with, like I was saying, so it's becoming, I went for collective intelligence. So I have a colleague who has a lot of experience in homelessness and vulnerable populations and mental health, PTSD, etc. So Laurence Roy is on my team. Marie-Marthe Cousineau, who's a criminologist and a professor, full professor at Université de Montréal. Dominique Bernier, who is an associate professor at a university and also criminal lawyer who's involved with the evaluation of our new IPV courts. Sorry, I forget the exact name I said. And we're also working with l'Alliance, which are our women's shelters. So we got a bit of funding to co-design this map, and we went to get a few other people. So we had 2 students, an occupational therapy student, a student in law, our partners, and we also went to get some TBI program managers, the head of a unit specialized in IPV at the Montreal Police Force. The director of youth protection services in Montreal was a member of our organizing committee, as well as a criminologist from the Montreal courthouse specialized in the IPV. So we had so we worked for a year to prepare this cross-training event to develop a roadmap. This took place last week, so obviously I don't have too many results to share yet, but it was a fascinating day. Everyone was so motivated. Everyone was talking to each other. When do you have a chance to talk to a lawyer, to a healthcare worker, to a shelter worker, and everyone was in the same room. It was amazing. So we mobilized 60 representatives from communities, social, legal, health, rehab, research sectors, and women with lived experiences. We had numerous intersectoral discussions and presentations, and we wanted as a team to illustrate what an ecosystem looked like. So everyone got a chance to share about why is IPV and TBI important in their field of work. What are their issues? What are the solutions that they can see happening? And obviously, because so far health is not present, I was rather pleased to see that we had 17 people who work in health and TBI rehab who were present, and we also had 3 survivors. So what we worked on during that day, so this came a lot from a recent article that was published by Sue and collaborators. So these issues were presented to the small group discussions, and we asked for each one of these that the group identify immediate concrete actions that can be put into place, low-hanging fruit. So, and each group addressed a different issue. So health, community, and social legal sectors are worlds that do not know each other. We live worlds apart, and we need to develop partnerships to improve the care and services provided. So the question that was asked is, how do we do that? The near absence of TBI screenings in the context of IPV and the lack of intersectoral understanding of long-term health impacts of brain injury. What do we do about that? The challenges of navigating the healthcare system by women, community, and legal workers when brain injury is suspected. That is such a huge problem. What can we do better? Women who are victims of IPV-related brain injury do not generally seek treatment for their brain injury, so we know that, or they may refuse it, or they may be unable to follow the recommendations for interventions offered to them. What do we do about all this? Women who are victims of IPV-related brain injury face possible prejudices or challenges in the justice system. What do we do about that? So, very preliminary results. This day happened last week. So what kind of there was consensus on? We need intersectoral training on IPV and brain injury. Many others of my colleagues have said this. So we need to train, but what I wanted to know is in Quebec, in Montreal, what do we need to do? So some things have been published in the literature, but I wanted to hear from them. What do they want us to work on? So we need to train first contacts on IPV-related brain injury. We need to train healthcare professionals on IPV in university programs, through professional associations, continuing education sessions. Another suggestion, so we have in Quebec a 1-800 number for intimate partner violence. And so and that is working really well. People access that resource a lot. The idea that was put forth is it'd be really nice if you could have press on 7 if you are a suspect having you had a hit to the head or you had a loss of consciousness, and so that we can start giving information about brain injury from this very generic system that already exists. We need to be looking at how do we create safe places to be treated for IPV. I saw that in other provinces in Canada, there are some wonderful things happening. We don't have that in Quebec. So we need to start thinking about how to do that. There was a thought, it'd be wonderful. It was named this morning at the conference that I listened to from Hannah Varto, an intersectoral hub, same idea. Designated centers, we'd love to have designated centers for IPV-related brain injury in the continuum of our care. And we need to have public awareness campaigns on IPV-related brain injury. It's still not known. If women were hearing more about it, maybe they would state, I have a problem, I had this injury, I seem to have these symptoms, I'd like help. Our third project that was funded. So in this project, it's our pilot implementation of an ecosystem of services in Montreal, where we will build off of this last roadmap that we just developed. This project was funded by the Ministry of Economy, Innovation, Energy in the government of Quebec, and our Ministry of Health as well, but they were a smaller player. So we're really just starting, probably next week to develop this ecosystem, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we'll be working on. So our first step will be to map current services offered by communities, social struggle on that word, and health rehab sectors. Phase 2, we're going to work with all the partners to develop a support ecosystem for IPV related brain injury victims. And then in our third phase, we want to implement it for a period of about 12 months. Right now, our thought was to implement it only in women's shelters, but with all the partners that we have and all the interest in screening, we may be implementing it much beyond just the shelters, which I feel it would be a huge advantage. And then we'll have a pilot project to implement the support system and a closing event. Our fourth project, which was funded by Brain Canada really recently. So this we will be starting shortly as well. It took a bit of time to get all of the papers signed and everything. All these things are always long to get started. So we're going to be working on co-designing TBI screening. So how do we do TBI screening? Not a new tool, but how do we do the screening? And what in a post-screening protocol. Right now, our emphasis is on women's shelters, and what we want is to document the portrait of women victims of IPV in Quebec. So this also, so to summarize some of these different projects, so we had our day of cross exchange last week. We're starting to look at TBI screening and post-screening protocols. We're going to go towards service mapping in 2025. We're looking at having a portrait of IPV-related brain injury victims, 25-26, and implementing a support ecosystem in Greater Montreal during 2026-2027. I want to finish off with my key messages again. I think this is what's most stunning. So the prevalence of intimate partner violence, I will read them again. I think I just want to say them. The prevalence of intimate partner violence related brain injury is alternately both stunning and invisible. The healthcare system, particularly brain injury rehab, is missing in action regarding meeting the needs of these women. Now that we know, we need to do better. And one final thought, we need to dream bigger, one small step at a time. And that is it for my presentation.
Wow. Carolina, this is all incredibly impressive and so exciting. You know, for those of us who've been doing this work for a little bit longer and keep hitting this wall of awareness is building, but what do we do? How do we actually help? Because the services aren't there. I think you're giving a lot of us hope today because you're doing some really amazing stuff to make that happen. So thank you on behalf of everyone. I'm going to take a look at the Q&A to see about questions. We did have someone asking about forensic nurses. You know, we heard from Hannah earlier about the Embrace Clinic. We wish there was one in every community in Canada. But there was a question about, do you know if we have forensic nurses in Quebec regularly doing assessments for strangulation and collecting evidence? And are you working with, on your collaborations, any forensic nurses?
So I've been asking around about that because when I heard that you had that in British Columbia, I'm like, so what are we doing? So the question is being asked. I've just recently heard that we have a new training program now for more specialized nurses, the IPS. I forget what it is in English. And I've heard that within that extra training course, there is now the option of training for, I don't know if it's all violence or intimate partner violence, but I think it may be coming. But I haven't yet to meet a nurse who calls herself a forensic nurse or who has that training. We have one nurse who's on our coordination team because we've only found one. And she's working in one of the shelters. And she really wanted to be in the shelter, not in the hospital system. She didn't want to quit her job. So she was loaned to the shelters from the healthcare system. She works there full time, and she fundraises for her salary herself so that she can offer services to women full time in the shelters. So I haven't heard beyond that, but love to have conversations because this one nurse is amazing to have on our team. She can open so many doors, and this one shelter has actually found a doctor who will go do 3 hours a week in their shelter. And another shelter is looking to hire OTs. So I really believe in small steps. We can't get discouraged. If something's going forward, we're going in the right direction.
Absolutely. And we have a couple comments about how The nurse practitioners work a little differently in Quebec, and starting with those who are working in sexual violence clinics might be a starting point. I know I had reached out to the International Forensic Nurses Association to find out, and I recently heard back from Ashley Stewart, who's in leadership at that group, about one forensic nurse in Quebec. And this all conversation reminds me I need to send you her name and contact
I'd
info.
love to.
Yeah,
My
we
big
have
thing right now is to have as many conversations as I can have. That's what I'm doing.
absolutely.
I'm also meeting, so I've met with social workers who work at the courthouse, and they meet the women before the women meet the prosecutors. And they really, I'm going to give them a training within the next few weeks on brain injury, because they're like, why are we only starting to hear about this? So this one person I met, she's been working there for 20 years. So she said so many, and it's physical violence because it's, it's in the criminal justice system. She says, obviously a lot of these women have had brain injury. Why am I only hearing about this now? But at least they have heard it thanks to all of these colleagues who've done all of this amazing work. I can just show them the statistics that have been done by others, and I can say to my colleagues, so what are we going to do about it?
Absolutely. Now, in terms of the occupational therapy side, we have a question from Christina. She said, "This is an amazing session. Thank you so much." She is a newer OT working mostly in the inpatient setting, but she has done some work educating domestic violence shelter organizations on potential for brain injury. What advice do you have for how a new OT could get more involved in the community?
Okay, so I have first thoughts on this. So what I'm looking, so with this one shelter, I can only always say where I'm at. I don't want to step forward. So where I'm at, so this one shelter who wants to open an OT position, we're looking for a new grad. Because they're the most likely to not already have a job and to be interested. So we're talking to new grads right now to see about filling this position. And what we've decided is we're going to try and put together a community of practice around this new grad of OTs. So I will be on this committee. I'm going to be looking at talking to my colleagues who work in brain injury programs, those who work in parenting clinics, and others. There's also a lot of women who'd like to return to work, but because of the brain injury, sometimes it's harder to return to work, and we don't want them to end up homeless, which is some of my other projects where I'm catching these women in the homeless population. So I'm gonna be working on trying to develop a community of support system around these new grads. And we're just going to see, let's just start and let's just try and do it well.
Yeah, amazing. Well, do we have any other questions before we wrap up? Of course, Carolina will be open to answering some via the chat if people wanted to add any later. Hannah would like to talk to you. Embrace Clinic would love an occupational therapist.
I'd love to have a conversation so that we can explore. There's Julia, I just got a blank, Schmidt, who is
Yeah.
an OT prof in BC, and I know she's very sensitive to all of this, and and I think we can have a conversation with Julia, and maybe she'd be interested in sending a student and supervising that student within your clinic. I think it'd be awesome.
Certainly, we know the folks at Barrow Neurological Institute have had some great success, including occupational therapy in their brain injury, intimate partner violence rehab. So that's wonderful. Thank you again for an incredible talk. It's really great to hear the work that's happening on the ground, this practice-based stuff that I think gives the folks who are out there doing.
I don't know if I'm disconnected or Karen.
You're not. Karen's internet held out really well,
Okay.
but I think we've lost her for a few moments.
I could just maybe, oops, yeah, we'd
Go ahead.
lost you.
I was just saying it's wonderful to have this practice-based talk that gives the researchers hope that the work they're doing is going out in the world and actually being put to good use rather than sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Absolutely. Just the other thing I was going to ask, so I will be in the session later tonight. If anyone would like to further the conversation, I'd be very happy to meet people.
That's marvelous. Thank you again. And I will hand it back over to Ella or Carrie or whoever's taking things to the next stage.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. That was a fantastic talk, Carolina. We're so grateful for you to be here and to give this perspective. And I'm excited that you're going to be in the speaker sessions tonight to answer more questions.